Welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast, your weekly look inside the world of fly fishing presented by Pete Tigers. If you're enjoying listening, please consider subscribing.
The doors for the coming trout season are about to be flung open. Am I excited? Just a little. I'm joined by two previous podcast guests today, Matt Eastham and Stuart Minnikin. The topic will be about early season on the river. Thanks so much for dropping by, fellas. It's been great to catch up. I know we've been talking a little bit off mic, but Matt, how are you doing? Are you well, buddy?
Yeah, very well, Pete. Ready for the end of winter, definitely. Ready for a bit of sunlight.
Absolutely. And Stuart, are you in good form?
Yeah, good form. Feel a bit snowed under with work and things at the moment, but yes, keeping healthy, keeping fit. So yeah, good. Thank you.
Good. Now, the reason I wanted to speak to you both was the trout season, as we know, this is being recorded sort of almost mid-February time. The trout season isn't that far away now. I'm of a certain vintage, but I still get excited. Is it wrong still to get excited about the start of a coming trout season? Matt, what do you think?
Absolutely not. There's got to be something to get excited about in life, hasn't there? I certainly do. More so these days that I do less grayling fishing, so it feels like there is a more psychological divide between the two. It used to be that I'd fish quite heavily all through winter, and then the 14th of March and the 15th of March, there wasn't really much other than an arbitrary change of seasons to separate them. I'd be deep nymphing for grayling one day and go to the river the next day, hoping for a miraculous hatch that no one flicks a switch to the end and says the trout season starts to the fish themselves. So it'd just be a continuation of the deep nymphing. Whereas these days I tend to do less grayling fishing, so it feels a lot more. I force myself into more of a kind of fresh start mindset. To be honest, maybe that's an age thing, but that's how I approach it now.
That's a nice one and interesting for me because I think this is probably the back end of last year and this year the least grayling fishing I've actually done in quite some time. Do you find, Stuart, that did you do a lot of grayling fishing? And if you did or didn't, I'd be fascinated to hear about. But also, how does that lead you into the season as well? Are you sort of in a great frame of mind and great excitement about what's to come, hopefully?
I've probably resurrected my grayling fishing a little bit more than I used to. I used to kind of have this cut off around about the new year, really, sort of unofficial. It just kind of came to the new year. That was it then. So hung the rod up till the new season. And I have actually done that this year. Me and Matt and our friend Richard, we had a day's grayling fishing up north. It was a tough day, and pretty much on that day I thought, right, that's it. I'll hang up the rod then now till the trout season starts in March. But no, most seasons now I do keep going for the grayling. Steady away, don't go mad. Steady, just 2 or 3 hours a day, that sort of thing. Maybe twice a week, something like that. I just there's definitely a change, even if you were fishing on March the 14th for grayling. Come March the 15th, the start of the trout season, there's definitely something feels different within for me when the trout season starts. And just like Matt sort of said there, you suddenly expect that that's it, the trout season starts, and you're going to start seeing large dark olives and March browns coming off in big numbers, and clearly it doesn't happen. You hopefully start to see a few, and it'll build up through into April. But yeah, there's no switch that's been flicked there.
Yeah, I know yesterday I was grayling fishing with my friend Warren. We got a proper kicking from the fish and it was fun, but it was, for me, I felt a little bit rusty actually. And it was in a nice way, and it made me think a little bit more about my fishing. We weren't chucking metal. We were both fishing bamboo rods actually and just fishing a nymph under a indicator basically, which was great fun, chatting and just taking it easy. But I did find I was fishing a pretty small stream, but I did find I caught a few more branches than perhaps I don't usually. So it was nice to do that. Made me think about that a little bit more. But yeah, there's great excitement about it. It's like you say, it's fascinating for me thinking about you saying about the switch. And I always say that because the trout have no concept or the grayling of what the season is. And we always start, and I remember walking down my local river in back end of February, 2-3, it must be about 4 years. Obviously, the lockdowns have skewed everything a little bit. But remember walking down the river in February time, I think I was in a T-shirt, seeing large ducks come off, loads, no rising fish because our fish don't tend to get going really till April. But you think in your mind and your hope is that, yeah, I'm going to see a rise. I'm going to see a rise. And that last season, the trout season was a relatively difficult one. I don't know, did you sort of experience those cold starts and the fishing getting going, Stuart? Did you find that a slow start to things?
Yeah, it was a very slow start. It was unique really because it was so cold and we had such bad weather that normally you're praying for the cloud cover, and I had a week. I actually stayed up in Cumbria for a week fishing those rivers, and it was strange that you wanted the sun to come out, and the sun came out from behind the cloud. All of a sudden, the flies were coming off. It was obviously warm in the water, and they were coming off. Then the sun would disappear, it would stop. So yeah, it completely turned all the rules on its head, really. I said you were just praying for sun because that's what brought the flies out and the fish out.
And Matt, do you find those early season hatches, are they short-lived? Are they going to be a lunchtime phenomenon? Or sometimes I found when things get going, once that heat's permeated through the water a little bit, that some stuff will be going on around 4-ish as well. What are you looking for? Are you looking for that lunchtime and perhaps a little earlier as well? A little later, sorry?
Largely speaking, yeah. Our rivers follow the kind of sort of formulaic norm of the lunchtime hatches of large dark olives and March browns. Once the clocks change, obviously there's a psychological thing there, isn't there, where we tend to, if we don't adjust, you can fall into a trap of starting to fish too soon, can't you, during the day, and then you start to find that as those spring days, that those hatches start to elongate a little bit. Not long after the clocks have changed, you can still be fishing a hatch as you get towards 4:00 in the afternoon, and there's a few other bits start to happen, like a few midge coming off in the background, and even odd terrestrials as they come out of hibernation from amongst the bankside woodwork and so on. But yeah, early season. I mean, start of the season in my neck of the woods is 15th of March. We're over on the wrong side of the Pennines where Stu is. It's a week or so later, but early season, it's definitely going to be, that sort of 12 till 2:00 window. Although it depends on the river as well, because we head up into Cumbria a lot, and those Cumbrian rivers can be quite late to get going at times. My local river, the Ribble, is actually a really early starter, and there'll be hatches occurring about now. I mean, as early as late January, you'll see large dark olive hatches of sufficient intensity to bring grayling up. Anyway, even if the trout are still in hiding, But yeah, it's a targeted thing. It's nice. It's civilized fishing. It's bankers hours in the middle of the day, isn't it?
Yeah. And Stuart, do you find that you're preparing that fly box over winter? Are you getting patterns ready? Are you a voracious sort of winter tire of flies? Do you like to get those fly boxes ready? And are you similar? When I've not tied many flies in a few years now, but when I was tying them during winter, I was imagining tying those dry flies as I was tying them and imagining the fish rising on the river and things happening. Do you like to go through that sort of process during the winter to keep you ticking over?
Yeah, in a normal year, I would just start probably October, November, just start tying, and say just seeing which patterns are missing, filling up, trying some new ones. Like you say, exactly that. When you're tying a particular fly, like a caddis for the summer, you kind of, it takes you to the river, takes you to just as it's like twilight time in the summertime, or you're tying an olive for the spring. And all you can see is fish rising and flies popping up and everything. So yeah, that's one side of it. I don't really enjoy fly tying, if I'm honest. It's a means to an end, really. If I could just wave a wand and they were there, that's it. I would never tie a fly, to be quite honest with you. It just it's not really my thing. Don't have the patience, etc. This year's been a bit different. I literally, no exaggeration, I tied my first fly last week. one day at home. Started strangely on grayling nymphs, and the theory behind that was I'm not going to be tying any flies sort of through the summer, early autumn. And my nymph box is bare. My favourite patterns in my nymph box is completely bare. So I thought I need to get those in the box so they're there for next autumn, really. So a couple of got them sat on the desk here next to me now. Some endorphins and some wasps. Tied some of those up, so they're ready to go. That's it now. I think as far as sort of grayling patterns go, I'm just about to start tying some one of my favourite spring flies, the foam dun. So yeah, now it's full on for the next month. Sort of playing catch up, really. I say I've just not tied any flies this winter at all. So yeah, spring olives, March browns, etc. Hopefully knocking them out as quick as I can, which is not particularly quick for me, but yeah, full on now.
Nice. Do you think that's the form of guiding you? Because I wonder if it's, and we'll come on to that a little bit later, the no interest. I remember coming in from the river and there might be a pattern that was working, knocking up a few of my efforts and replacing them quickly, and not having to do that now. Do you think that might be part of it for you?
No, I think for me, I just other interests have kicked off a little bit this year. I'm coming up for retirement. I think I've mentioned to you before on one of these. I retire in July, so I'm just kind of sorting myself out for that. Really, laying some plans. So heavily into photography at the moment. It's kind of consuming most of my life at the moment. I'm just trying to find my level, I think, to start with. So I think that's just whereas I would normally be sat here tying flies, I've been out just wandering around with the camera. Yeah, no other excuse than that, I don't think, really. If I'm honest, no, not a fly tyer. So I'd just rather be out with the camera. But now I've realised I've got to get stuck in. I'm not going to have any flies. I'm going to be raiding mats come spring.
And I've been enjoying your pictures as well, your photos as well. So we'll try and point people towards those at some stage so they can see those. Matt, something you said was really interesting to me, was that you said banker's hours for, the hatches and stuff like that. Does that mean on open day or early season generally that you're looking for rising fish more than anything else? Are you waiting for that, or how do you do you have a couple of rods set up? What do you try and do for early season sort of setups? Is there a particular route that you like to go down? Is there particular setups that you like? I'd just love to get an inside track into that.
Yeah, if I go back sort of 15, 20 years ago, I was probably I'd be chomping at the bit, and I would fly through pools with the nymph rod right from sort of like 10 o'clock in the morning, and that's changed now. I haven't done that for a number of years. It's spring fishing in the north of England for me is epitomised by hatches, rising fish, and the chance to chuck flies at the potentially your biggest fish of the season. And we're quite lucky to have rivers up here that have trout of a really good average size. So increasingly over time, I've just become a dry fly fisher in spring. If I do go off piste, I mean, sometimes there's days when nothing happens. You see a trickle of 2 or 3 olives around lunchtime, and you think, "Here's the hatch." It's starting to build, and then an hour later you're realizing that was the hatch. Days like that, and you realize you're either not going to make a cast at all, which sometimes happens, or if you feel the need to get the line extended and do something, I tend to less reach for the nymph rod these days because I've done enough of that through winter, and perhaps fling streamers about and see if I can pull a big thing out of a hole or an undercut somewhere. But very much so, the target is the intention, the aim is dry fly fishing really, and that concentrated window allows you to sort of focus your efforts on that, cover a bit of water, see if you can find a localized hatch. And it becomes, it doesn't take long to sort of establish if that's going to happen or not. I quite like that kind of fishing. It's it's unpredictable, but there's a predictability to it, isn't there? That's sort of, I find comforting. It's that knowledge, that moment of rebirth of the river after its winter sleep. It always happens. no matter what doubts you have, it always happens. It's a beautiful moment when it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And that patience thing, I think, and I know we've talked about it on previous podcasts, I think probably with both of you, that waiting for that rise pays massive dividends and it's hugely rewarding. And it made me sort of think about last season and that slow start. And like I say, and I've said many times before, it's really the Granham that tends to wake trout up a little bit more. And I remember Emma and I sitting on the riverbank where I do most of my fishing, and we watched Granham coming off like there was no tomorrow and not a fish moving there. But I learned something from that process, and it is almost like you say, making the one cast for that one fish, and particularly in your part of the world, if it can be a very, very special fish, it's worth all of that time. It takes some doing. Do you find, Stuart, you're similar, that you'll do that, you'll wait, or might you crack sometimes and go for a duo or anything else? Are you similar sort of in your approach to the early season and waiting for that hatch and the rising fish? How do you go about it?
Not exactly like Matt said, really, to the letter. I think it's kind of a new style. I don't know if it's something that maybe Paul Proctor's kind of done, or whether it's just that when you get to a certain age, you just had enough of nymphing and things like that. But yeah, I think also one thing is, it's in the back of your mind that you know it's a good pool and you know there's big fish in there. And if you go through it with a nymph of a team of spiders or even a streamer beforehand, you might be putting those fish down for when the hatch starts. So I think it's always in the back of your mind. So typically you'll pull up and you'll walk to the first pool, and you'll obviously keep low, keep out of sight, maybe sit down 5 or 10 minutes. And if me and Matt are together, we'll be sat there having a chat. Nothing happens, so you sneak round again, still try and keep out of the way of the pool so you're not spoiling it. Move to the next one, same again, sit down, chatting away 5 or 10 minutes, and that's really the pattern of the day. And then there comes a point when you can, right, we've done enough of this. And I think it's rare, depends where I am and that, but it's rare I'll actually sort of head back and never have had a cast in the day. There will be some point where either the nymphs will go on or the streamers will go on one or the other. But it is that in the back of your mind that, well, I suppose, as I'm saying, there's two things really. One, you don't want to spoil the pool, and the other thing is you kind of saving it.
And it is about, like you say, you know, those process, waiting, being patient, not making many casts. And I think you were dead right. It's a combination, I think, of probably age. The stuff that Paul is doing has rubbed off not just on us, but I would think a fair few other people as well, and that ability to wait. And I guess if I was younger, but I've again described on previous podcasts, I remember running to the river trying to put my waders on while I was running because you were so excited. But it's nice in one way, isn't it, that you're so excited about doing it. I want to fish, I want to fish. But then that patience thing, and like you say, having a fishing buddy that you can sit and share that experience with and then spot that fish makes it all the more nicer from that point of view. Do you go, Matt, through that gentlemanly thing of saying, no, you have it, or how does that work for you guys when you're sitting there and you see a nice fish start to rise?
That's exactly it, Pete. It's you go, no, you go, no, you go. I'll have the next one. You have the, you know. I think it's probably fair to say that quite a lot of the times we fish together, there's not an awful lot of fishing really gets done. It's that dynamic, isn't it? I think we've mentioned it before. If you fish on your own, it's when you tend to fish a little bit more intensively, and perhaps a little bit better when you fish on your own. But you know, if that's what it was all about, we'd just fish on our own all the time, wouldn't we? So, you know, I can't speak for Stuart. I suspect it's the same, but I get a great deal of satisfaction from watching Stu catch a great fish. And it's almost like when you're doing that kind of stalking down type fishing, it's almost, there's a bit of teamwork involved in both of you watching different parts of the pool and kind of almost like semi-guiding each other. It's really good fun. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart, when it comes to, it sounds as though when I fish with a friend, it's exactly the same, or friends. And, you know, Warren and I just did it the other day, and you go through that gentlemanly moment where, you know, you're just as pleased if your friend catches it. Having a fishing friend, though, I've always found, and I know on one of the podcasts I spoke with Chad actually about it, it's quite, I've found, an intensive, not interrogation, but you want to make sure that you're fishing with that right person, don't you? Because you don't want that moment where they appear to be, and I'm only speaking for myself, but they seem to be taking all the shots, but I'm too polite to say, can I have a go? So, and we'll clap politely when they catch a fish and everything else. But have you found, Stuart, that you do, it takes sometimes some time to find the right fishing buddy, but sometimes it clicks immediately as well. And it, as I said, that's one of the reasons I wanted the two of you on, because I know you fish together and I know you enjoy fishing together, but that selecting the right fishing friends are not as an easy process as you think, is it?
No, I think you meet through whatever circumstances. I think me and Matt met through social media, really. Maybe comment on each other's blogs, particularly Matt's blog in the early days. So we met that way. Then you have a day's fishing eventually. Matt used to take me as a guest on his club water, and then I suppose then you suss each other out, don't you? Whether it's your type of, I don't know about type of person, but type of fisherman, I suppose. If you've got completely different styles, if someone's jumping through all the pools, it might not be your style. But yeah, we came together, sort of thrown together maybe through social media, and yeah, we both same outlook on life and on fishing and styles of fishing, etc. And then because of that, you just become friends. And well, I wouldn't like to say how many years we've been friends now. It's a long time. And yeah, it's just nice to get together, and with someone like I say, we have a lot in common away from fishing as well, like photography and walking mountains and things like that. So much in common, but particularly the fishing. So yeah, it's not. I don't think it's a conscious choice. It's just something that just happens. You meet someone who's kind of your sort of person, and that's it. I don't find it easy making friends. So yeah, it's good when you get someone with things in common like that.
Yeah, that's nice. And Matt, did you find early on as well that this was a match for you that worked really, really well? Because I've sensed and I think of friends that I've fished with now regularly, I knew pretty quickly, whereas I've made the odd mistake and I thought, oh, it might be. And then I thought, actually, perhaps this isn't. And they're not as slow as them as a person in any way, shape or form, just from the fishing dynamic. Have you found that, like with Stuart, things clicked very, very quickly and you knew, yeah, we're going to be fishing together quite quickly?
Probably, I think so, yeah. You kind of like hit it off with someone, don't you, or not? But the fishing thing's a strange one, isn't it? Because I don't know if you can relate to this, but from a fishing point of view, it doesn't take too much of a difference of opinion about small things to kind of like throw the whole thing into incompatibility, if you know what I mean. It's queer, really, because Stuart and I have sort of, I would say, quite niche views on what fishing gives us as individuals. It's maybe, I'm trying to think of examples, but it'd be difficult to say. But there aren't many people that I can think of that I could go tramping off into the wilds and camp rough and catch, crappy little trout out of moorland locks for a week, and still come away feeling like it had been a great success. So I think you need, if you've got two people whose outlook on life and particularly fishing in particular is identical, then you're bound to get on. But yeah, I mean, I could see how it'd only take a small difference in views on. I mean, I think as Stuart alluded to it there, if one guy wants to, breach into a pool and just catch as many fish as he can, it doesn't matter how well you get on as individuals, does it? It's not going to, if that's not your style of fishing, it's just not going to work. Again, I can't speak for Stuart, but I could sit on the bank and watch him fish all day. And I never think, bloody hell, I wish that was me in there. Now it's like kind of every fish we catch, it sort of feels to me like a bit like a team effort in a way,
Yeah, no, I like that. I know when I fish with my buddy Perry, it's very similar. And, back end, I managed to catch a nice one and he hadn't got down, but I phoned him and said, I think it might happen. It might happen. And he had a really nice fish. And you're just really thrilled, like you say, to share those moments with people, aren't you? And it doesn't matter. I could have caught that fish, I guess, if I'd have hung around, but I didn't want to. I wanted my friend to have a go. And that was really, really cool to be able to do that. I wanted to, you've both mentioned streamers a little bit. Matt, I know that you touched on those and it was interesting. We've talked about them a little bit and somebody wanted to come and fish where, I fish and was sort of fielding me out for an invite and stuff like that. Where I fish is not particularly long, but it's long enough. But they wanted to just come along and pull streamers and nothing else. And I sort of politely said, I think I'd rather try and catch those on a dry. And what I meant by that was, look, I don't look down on it as a method, but I think if I caught one that way, would that mean it would lessen its chances in 2 or 3 months' time of coming up for a dry fly? And it's funny, I guess, if you're familiar with a piece of water, that you feel that way about it. Have you ever felt that about streamer fishing, Matt? And how's that going? Because I know when we did the podcast last that you said it was sort of you were experimenting with it. It was a work in progress. How has that actually played out for you?
Well, I have. I think it's fair to say I've given it a right good shot over the last couple of years. You'll probably remember me saying to you that prior to that I'd sort of dallied with it on and off for a number of years, but never really kind of given it a decent shot. Now, I think we both have really, and we both, I think it's fair to say, gone about it in slightly different ways. I'm not sure about the point you make about whether a fish is likely to rise in the future if you've caught it on a streamer. I think on the rivers I fish, I can't see that being an issue particularly. I think it's just in my view, it's an equation of food availability. If there's an invertebrate food availability there, that fish will be out and onto a feeding line and taking advantage. The streamer fishing for me is more just a kind of, it's almost like a let's see what's in here kind of exercise. It's an interesting and quite active backup method. Don't get me wrong, I do like to fish nymphs through the trout season, but in contrast to the sort of winter grayling fishing where it's very much short line, dredging the bottom, in summer I prefer to sort of fish the nymphs quite light in pocket water. It's a different thing, usually off a fly line as well, which is a bit unfashionable these days. But the streamer thing, it's I'd like to say it's been a great success, but I've had a couple of run-ins with really, really large trout, but I've also had an awful lot of fish that are what Stu and I now refer to as almost like jokingly as streamer-sized fish, the kind of £1.5 type things that seem to just chase a streamer down at will. And the conclusion I've come to, I think, is probably I'm probably not deploying the method to its maximum potential because it's always going to be a backup method for me. And I think something hit home when I was listening to one of your recent podcasts with, is it Fred, is he called? Fishes streamers a lot. Yeah. Now, Fred, if I remember right, made a comment about fishing the Eden and catching some good fish on streamers. And he said it was a day when the river was up a little bit and there was clearly a lot happening. There were fish rising everywhere. Well, that kind of struck a chord because there's no way on this earth I could ever pull a streamer when there's fish rising everywhere. But that's probably what is required to convert that method into some consistently big fish. So I'm probably by default deploying it at times when it's maybe the river's a little bit quiet, a little bit sleepy, and maybe you're only going to get a certain amount of action in those circumstances. But I've had contact, haven't landed because I think something about the way I've set up my articulated flies, something to do with the balance, I suspect probably isn't right. So I've jagged a few fish and had a couple of on-offs with fish which would have been the biggest trout I've ever landed in a river in this country without a doubt. So I'm still curious, still experimenting with it, but it's always going to be a backup method for me.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I was alluding to, and probably not very clearly, that I meant, would I rather streamer them out, or would I rather take them on dry and their ability? I think I guess what I was trying to say is I'd keep them for another day when they were rising. But there are, like you say, those opportunities to perhaps find one of those fish. And, on the river I fished, the biggest one I've taken was on a streamer, hardly surprisingly, as you say, for food, from a food point of view. But I think my favourite time is probably when I can't fish for salmon, but it's still a bit of colour and it's a bit high for trout, for rising trout. It's then that I might play. Do you, Stuart, have any preferences to that? Is there anything you can add to that about your streamer fishing and how you enjoy that, and any approaches that you have to it?
I do find it exciting, very exciting at times. But for me, it's always going to be a secondary method. It'll be the first method if the conditions suit, if the river's high, it's coloured, etc. I'm not going to go out with a dry fly. Probably not with nymphs. Stream would probably be my line of attack in those conditions. But given a good water height and everything for normal fishing, it's just going to fill in the gaps. Sometimes I'll fish streamers before I hatch, just passing time for filling in the gaps till something starts. Sometimes you might fish all the way up looking for a riser, dry flies, nymphs, and then think, right, that's the end of the day, but I'll fish down quickly, pull in the streamer, see if I can pull something else out. But it's definitely a secondary method for me. It's exciting because you always feel you're going to get that big fish. Just a little bit of a gap filler, secondary method for me.
Yeah, and that whack off the fish is pretty cool, isn't it? When they do connect. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, we like that. Yep, that's another thing to add to the list. Do you have, Stuart, any news? Are you sort of? I was thinking about it today, that there's a new season sort of resolutions, probably the wrong sort of term, but do you have any sort of new season resolutions that you sit and set yourself and think, yeah, I'm going to do this today, I'm going to do that? And, like I say, today I was sitting there thinking, right, okay, I'm catching bugger all salmon, so I will go back, and I still fish them, but I might just go back to fishing the classic spay flies, and that's it. Because if I'm not going to catch anything, I might as well feel good and my flies look absolutely stunning. Do you have any, Stuart, resolutions or any plans, or do you just go with the flow?
No, I think I kind of analysed the season before a little bit. And like we've just touched on streamers, I think maybe 2 seasons ago, Matt and I think we sort of fished streamers to death, really. We were quite new to it. And we fished it time and time again, just learning, really, I suppose, at the time. Might be 3 seasons ago now. And at the end of the season, I kind of looked at it and I thought, no, one of it was laziness, because it's easier to fish a streamer, just cast and pull it back, than it is to go nymphing. So I analysed the season. I thought, yeah, you overfished it. I could see why I did that. But yeah, for the following season, only fish streamers if you kind of really have to, or that gap filling again if you've fished up that end of the day, right, quickly fish down with the streamer. It's just really a case of analysing what I've done in the previous season. Not so much really what I can do better. Some of it will be that, whether I can learn something or catch bigger fish than that. But it's more, I think, about enjoyment, really. So fishing the streamers, overfished it, didn't really enjoy it. So right, I'll put that on the back burner a little bit this year. Don't be so lazy. I'll fish nymphs, fish dries, etc. So that's probably the only kind of resolution I will sort of make before fishing. Just look back at the season gone and just ring the changes from that. The only thing I really do is I sort of daydream about different places where I want to fish. So I've got all my usual haunts that I'll fish, and then you think, oh yeah, I've not fished there for years, or I've never fished there, that type of thing. So I'll make a point, even to the point sometimes of making a list, so because it's easy to forget these things. So sometimes even make a list. Yeah, I'll fish there, and tick them off. And some things might be a place you'd want to go in spring. Some might be a summer thing. Some might be a mayfly thing, etc. So yeah, that's the only kind of resolution really I would make. Just maybe pick out some destinations that I've not fished in a while or not fished before.
How about you, Matt? And also, one of the things Stuart just mentioned there that I thought was really interesting was that he said he looks back on the previous season. And are you the sort of person who keeps a diary as well, and you use that as a reference as well? So I guess, again, I'm asking you to look forward. Have you got any resolutions? But do you look back, and if you keep a diary, do you look back into that for reference as well?
Well, as far as resolutions are concerned, I guess not really. I tend to approach each season now along the lines of just hoping that I can create some memories, because I tend to assess my seasons looking back in terms of how many, I don't want to call them red letter days, because often they're not like red letter days, but how many sort of days I've come away with that will stick in my mind for a long time. And sometimes, for whatever reason, you get seasons where that doesn't happen very much. And I kind of like dread having a season like that, where I maybe for whatever reason, whether it's work or whatever, just don't actually manage to get out and fish much, or the conditions are always rubbish. But I think this season, the one little thing I've promised myself is that sometimes there's a method that you want to gain a bit of proficiency in that you maybe not tried very much of, and this season I want to just give small streamers on Euro rigs a go. I don't see it occupying too much of my time, but it's an avenue that I haven't really looked into, the kind of dead drifted or slightly manipulated streamer on a short line, small patterns. So I'm going to give that a bit of a go. But other than that, my heart is very much in seeing that big neb appear above the water as a big trout sucks down another fly. And regards to the second half of your question, looking back, I confess to being a bit of a nerd when it comes to this. I sort of keep records and spreadsheets and things. I like it. It follows the same pattern for me every year. It's kind of like I track the progression of spring, really. It's like my own little personal spring watch. I have dates when the first this appears and the first that appears. And it gradually runs out of momentum when I get into sort of summer months and that kind of initial flush of wildlife activity levels off. I always find that kind of diary just pedals away once we get past probably around about the solstice. But yeah, I can tell you what day I saw my first grannon and every other species that we see in spring, and what heights the river were, and the times of the hatches and all that business. It's a bit sad, really.
Your words, not mine. But tell me, Stuart, I wanted to move on a little bit as well about flies, and I guess you may not be proponents of, let's say, the jingler fly, for example. And that's a hugely popular pattern with many, myself included. And let's say along with a pheasant tail or a gold-ribbed hare's ear, it does show that we don't always need the latest must-have fly tying material. Do you find that yourself, and have you refined your fly box as a result of that? Where do you stand on that sort of view?
Yeah, the jingler for me doesn't work that well. I've caught some good fish on it, but yeah, I don't. I think to me the jingler works on sort of fairly fast riffles, broken water, and quite often in spring when I'm looking for those bigger fish, they're not in that sort of water. So I'm fishing the smoother water where perhaps the jingler wouldn't work as well. I have caught fish good fish on smooth water on a jingler, but it's certainly not a first choice. So yeah, so the jingler's in my box. I just find it an okay fly. It's there. If maybe they've refused one of my top flies, I'll put the jingler on. My two main flies are the foam dun and just a fly that I've probably started using the last couple of years. What I just call a hackled CDC dun. So it's just a typical dun that everybody ties, but with the hackle wound behind the wing and just slightly in front, trimmed off, sort of flush underneath, so it works sort of as legs. It helps it float a little bit. Works as imitates the legs on the fly, and it also works as a spinner as well later on. So it's whereas the legs in the dun would become the outstretched wings of a spinner. So that's probably just overtaken my foam dun at the moment as my main fly. And then as regards sort of new materials and things, I think you need to keep your eye out. Good example, I listened to a talk that Matt gave last year to our fishing club, and he mentioned a fly of Jeff Johnson, the fishing guide up in Cumbria, the March Brownie Merger. I'd never seen that fly before, liked the look of it, tried a few, and that was my top March Brown pattern last year. So, okay, it's not a new pattern, it was new to me. So you've got to keep your eye out looking for things like that. The form done, I've not used that for that many years. Again, so if you're not keeping your eye out for new patterns, you're not going to find them. But yeah, they don't. All these latest materials and things doesn't really do it for me. Me and Matt and Richard were talking about a fly that we saw yesterday, and far too fancy for us. It just doesn't need to be like that. So I'm not a fly tyer, so I'm not going to spend hours sat on the vice tying fancy flies. I know what works for me anyway, and that's that. So it's fairly simple. It's the right size, right silhouette. Colour is probably secondary really to everything else. That's it. But yeah, you do have to keep your eye out. I mean, the Endolphin that I mentioned, that's an absolutely killing grayling fly now. Came out of nowhere just by chance, saw it in a magazine, tied a few up, and it's been a cracking fly from day one on my leader as that fly. So just every so often a fly will come along that's just gives you the edge. And like I said, the Endolphin, the foam done to name just two. So yeah, keep my eye open. But yeah, I know you've not got to have that latest fly.
Yeah, the foam done, I'd agree, is a cracking fly. Really, really good. Tell me something. As we're your side of the Pennines, I believe, a friend of mine, Brian, who used to come down from Yorkshire, I sadly lost him back end of last year, but John Story. And he'd bring this down and tell me what a wonderful fly it was. And I don't doubt that. We couldn't catch a bloody thing on it. I assume it works really well for you up both sides of the Pennines, does it?
Well, I know the fly. I don't have any. Can't say I've ever used it, to be quite honest. I could see it working, actually. I think that it's got that white wing, hasn't it, in front of the hackle. So I could see it working, could see why it would work, but it's just not a fly for me.
Yeah. No, I've never caught anything. How about you, Matt? Has that worked for you?
Never tied one on, Pete, to be honest. But you know my thought on these things. Trout will eat anything. If it looks like food, they'll eat anything. So I'm sure it's deadly. We all have our own deadly flies.
Yeah, I haven't found that being deadly anyway yet. That's what I'm trying to discover at the moment. So hopefully I will. Yep, I've got some of his left. He brought so many of the bloody things, and I never tied them on because we couldn't catch anything on them. But we tried everything we possibly could. But that was fun to see. But I wanted to also chat to you a little bit about tackle. And do you think I've been thinking about this, and it came up in a conversation on a recent podcast as well, that do you think rods particularly, have they gone as far as they possibly can for the time being? I know we can change resins a little bit, but it seems as though we've settled on material. We've had attempts to try and change handles on rods. We've had attempts for different processes as well, away from graphite banana rods, for example. Matt, do you sense that the reason I'm bringing this up a little bit as well is because it's start of season, and it is, many of us go through that thought process. Perhaps I'll kick off the season with a new rod. I don't detect it happens in quite the same way. That may be that tackle, like I say, is so refined and works so well. You can't buy a bad rod now. And I wonder if cost will come into that. Where do you stand on that, Matt, at the moment? What are you feeling about that? Have you been tempted to refine the setup a little bit with a new rod?
You're probably talking to the wrong person, Pete, because I'm the absolute antithesis of a tackle tart, to be honest. I'm very much in the camp of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll tend to only add or replace a rod if I honestly believe that it's going to improve, my technical, the technical delivery of the fly or my own pleasure. But I don't accumulate surplus rods. If I've got one in a designation that I'm not using, I'll tend to sell it. So I like to think that every rod that I've got gets used at some point. It has a purpose. And that goes right back to, you relate to this. I've got my trusty pair of XPs that I've had for donkey's years that I would never. They don't get used that much these days, but I would never ever shift them on. One's a 10'6" that I use for floating line work out of the boat, and the other's the legendary 9'5". That said, I have got a rod on order. Actually, it's unusual for me, and it's only really because I've had a waft with, as you know, Stuart gets to play around with all the latest hardy gear. So sometimes I have a waft of Stuart's rods, and they've got this ultralight LL 10'8" for a 0 to 2 weight nymphing tool, and I've been giving a little bit of thought to. My nymphing rods are kind of like all sort of 10 years old now, and they're kind of like 10'3" from the days when we were just starting to chuck French leads and things. Whereas nowadays, I think a nymphing rod is very much we've moved away from that pretense of a rod being able to carry a fly line if we need it, haven't we? Nymphing rods now are dedicated leader to hand rods, and that particular tool is just a world apart from anything I've used, and certainly would add a different dimension than the rods I've already got. So I've got one of those on order. But generally, whole seasons pass, Pete, without me adding anything rod-wise to my collection, because if it feels comfortable, does what I want it to do, I'm not interested in the latest model because it's 8/10 of an ounce lighter. How light do rods need to be? So no, I'm not a tackle tart at all. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. I suspect we're going to get more and more of this, and as I said, where prices seem to be drifting up a little bit. And I think once you set a price on something as well, if you're bringing a new range, it's hard to bring it lower as well. So I'm fascinated to see where a stop point might be for some of these products and whether people say that might be enough now. So I was interested to get a sense of that. Stuart, when we did our podcast, I think those rods that Matt mentioned, the ultralight LLs, were just coming to the market. And I think you had some on their way to you. And that, I've got to be honest, was a range that pricked up my ears as well. And the 9.5 foot rods from a dry fly point of view. I think there's 2 weights and 3 weights in that range, which seem really fitted nicely for the sort of fishing that I like to do. How have you found those, and where do you stand on rods now? And I know it might be a slightly difficult question for you with relationships and everything else, but do you think that technology has the envelope's been pushed in the short term, possibly medium, as far as it can actually go?
Yes, good point. And over the years, I've thought that so many times that how we're going to improve on this. We can't surely get any lighter, and the actions can't improve. And every time you think that, something else comes out. So and every time it comes out, I don't know where the next sort of advancement's going to be. But the rod designers, Howard Cross in particular, I suppose, up at Hardy there, they do keep pulling these things out of the bag. I think if you think of things now, we've not moved that far forward in the last few years, other than the fact that it's been, as Matt sort of alluded to there, technique driven. So all the French or the Euro nymphing French leaders and Spanish leaders have come along. So I think tackle had to adapt a little bit to that, which it has done with the rod that Matt mentioned, and there's a few others in the range that will all do that in different lengths and different weights. So they've come out to suit the technique rather than just the rod advancing on its own. So yeah, in answer to your question, I say I think they will if new techniques come out, I think rods will again evolve for that. I'm sure there will be some advancements because there always is, but I haven't a clue where. I don't know what that is. As Matt said there, I am in the fortunate position that I get all my rods and reels from Hardy. So you do lead a very, very sheltered life. You talk about prices there, and I really haven't a clue what things cost because I rarely buy anything. So yeah, I know, and it might not might not be a nice thing to some people who've got to save up and buy things, but you might call it a job for me. I get these rods and obviously have to use them and publicise them and things on social media. So it's just one of those things. You just if you're getting anything for free like that, you just sort of lose touch of prices and actually having to go out and buy things like that. So it is a fortunate thing. But I must admit, I treat all my tackle as though I've gone out and bought it. I'm always really, really careful with things, clean it, look after it. And I still, when that courier van pulls up outside and I know he's dropping off another couple of hardy rods, I still get excited and still leg it down the stairs and rush upstairs and open it as quick as possible, have a waft around as you do, and quickly put some pictures on social media. So yeah, despite the fact that I could pretty much choose what rods I want to have, it's still very, very exciting, as much as if I bought it myself. Still enjoy using it, and I enjoy publicising it as well.
Nice. And for me, you made a really interesting point that rods in lengths, and I'm always look at rods and for the techniques as well, that where does something fit in? And that's where those ultralights in that length for me fitted into the rod lineup. And I think Howard, particularly at Hardy and Gray's, the Streamflex, they were onto that so quick, to me anyway. You know, they were the first longer, lighter rods that came to the market that I was actually aware of. And then we suddenly woke up, because I guess those, the comp guys were using these techniques before us in the mainstream really got to see them. But that was the first time I was thinking, wow, 9-foot 3-weight or a 10-foot 3-weight or 4-weight when those first Streamflex came. So yes, it's interesting for me that it may be the techniques that sort the way that the rods actually go and how we add to them, rather than, because I'm thinking about resins, I'm thinking about materials, and I can't see, to me, you can refine them a little bit, but is it going to make me sell my last year's rod to buy the new one? So I guess that may be the way that these companies may have to look at things looking ahead now as well. So I'm just really interested to hear what you guys think about it and get a sense of that as well. But one of the things, Stuart, I wanted to ask you before we move on, as a former guide as well, does that start of season feel a lot more different to you now, so that you're not having to take bookings, you're not having to chase stuff, you're not having to fit your own fishing around that? Do you miss that in any way?
No, we spoke about this last time. Don't miss it one little bit. So yeah, the start of the season really. I mean, it was always, I suppose, exciting, but nothing compared to what it is now. Just itching to go when March 15th comes round. Just out of that door, and you can't hold me back. Don't see the missus much at that time of year. I'm just gone. She knows that, she understands that, and that's it. And that didn't happen when I was guiding. I would definitely, in those days, I'd leave gaps in the diary. I wouldn't fill up all my time. I'd prefer to take the bookings more to the back end of spring, summertime, just so I can have more time to myself. But yeah, it's just a completely different feeling now, to be honest. Just glad to see the back of it.
Nice. Yeah. I've loved doing it. I've loved taking people fishing. I've loved introducing them, but the ability not to have to worry about that aspect of it now is wonderful, and just go fishing and enjoy it for what it was. But Matt, I wanted to ask, when you guys fish together, have you detected you have any nice little routines that you sort of drift into? And I mentioned that because my friend Perry, I mentioned earlier, that we have this really cool thing going, that when we'd grayling fish in the winter, I'd meet him on the M5 and he'd jump into my car with a sausage sandwich. I'd picked up the coffee and all those little bits that go with it. Do you guys have something that that the other person's going to do when you go fishing without you having to mention it?
Maybe to a degree. The pattern is I tend to do the driving. We because Stuart lives in Yorkshire and I live in Lancashire. If we're heading north, we converge around about Kirby Lonsdale, roughly, junction 36 on the M6, or sometimes junction 37. So we have our set parking places, and it usually, because I get business mileage covered in through my work, it's usually me that does the driving, So I'm usually there with a coffee waiting. I've stopped at the services and got a coffee. So it's kind of like the same that routine, and then it's pile the stuff in and head north, and then start talking about what's been grinding our gears on social media recently. Usually is what the next hour involves.
Yep, absolutely. We could go right down that one, but let's keep it upbeat for the time being. Yeah, we'll leave that one alone for the time being. And Stuart, you said, you guys are generally stalking fish down. You're waiting for that moment. Does that mean lunch is an important part of it? And if it is it a good pie? What is it that you'll sit down and chew the fat over social media or anything else with lunch? What do you tend to go for?
I would say, as I said earlier, Matt and I have a lot of things in common. When it comes to food, we don't. Matt will go all day without eating anything, and as soon as I get my waders on, I'm thinking, right, what can I eat next? That's pretty much the pattern of the day. And I said, right, Matt, I'm having done dinner. I'll catch up with you later, and just let him go on. So I've always been an eater, and that's that. So yeah, it's one thing we do differ on there. But we do. I mean, I'm partly joking. We do sit down, have a brew, and having a sandwich and things. No, that's pretty much Matt summed it up there. Really, it's just get in the car, chat away, and we just wander. I mean, my fishing day, whether I'm with Matt or someone else or on my own, is the same. Really, I wander up to a pool, give it 5 or 10 minutes. Give it a wide berth, move to the next one, and so on. And just if you're with someone, you spend that waiting time talking. Whereas if you're on your own, obviously you don't. You just sit there and that's it.
Yeah. Lunch is really important to me. And one of my friends, Warren, that I fish with, we almost entered an arms race that he'd come down and fish for the day, and he said, "Well, I've got this farm shop," and we'd have cut beautiful meat, Parma ham, then a pie, then a pasty and everything else. And then I said, I'll get lunch. And I was panicking about getting a pie as good as he'd got and all those sorts of things. Thankfully, it sorted out. We'll sit down, I'll have a cigar. He lights up his pipe and we put the world to rights in. I'm sure this is resonating with people. And I hope the people listening are thinking about their fishing friend coming into this, or friends, and how they think about it and those moments that you share with them. And that, Matt, brings me on to a nice one, and getting a sense of you talking about, how polite you are about letting each other fish the pool. One of the things I always notice with people that I've spent road trips with is that when you do that you put your belongings in the car and in the boot of the car, and it easily separates into your side and their side of the car. Do you find that, and everything stays there? Because I know we were talking a little bit about this off mic, and I said mine's sort of a bit of a Sahara desert that it drifts, and then I notice it gets poked back into my side of the car. Do you do a similar sort of thing as well when you're out on the road, Matt?
Yeah, I tend to try and leave the left-hand side of the boot free for Stuart and his big bucket of tricks that he has. He's got it's a wader bucket, isn't it? I think so. A big gorilla bucket full of stuff. So that goes in the boot, and so a bit of my stuff goes on the back seat because I know that the bucket's got to go in the boot. It's all very civilized, really. I think we just have I don't think we've ever discussed it. It's just what happens naturally. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things I guess I was alluding to. When you've got the right fishing buddy, everything slots in, be it the coffees in the Kirkby Lonsdale, be it whatever, those little things that you've got the right friend to fish with. And it goes almost without saying, doesn't it? You enter a higher plane that those things don't need to be said. The coffee will be there. It's when you notice when the coffee isn't there, or you start to worry when that's not there. But tell me, if you guys, Stuart, have you got anything planned for road trips, the two of you? Is there anywhere you've got planned out that you're hoping to go visit this year?
The only one I have booked this year is a trip to Aberdeenshire in May. But I'm not going. I'm going with some friends I went to Cuba bone fishing with a few years ago. I think Matt will tell you about that. I think Matt's got something planned. And I'm hoping maybe to do the 2, but I don't think the dates are going to match up somehow. So yeah, that's the only thing. I think I joined the same fishing club as Matt a few years ago, and so I used to do these trips every year. And then I kind of joined the club and thought, well, I'm silly really. I've got all this fishing that I've paid for on my doorstep, and it's certainly as good as the fishing when I go on these trips. So the last few years, I've made a point of sort of staying on my club water. But I just feel, and that's had nothing to do with COVID. I don't think it has just been a case of being a fairly new member in the club, wanting to find my feet there, discover the water, and get my money's worth, I suppose, really. But now, just feel like I've not travelled that far last few years. So yeah, I think I'm due a trip this year to Aberdeenshire, and hopefully it'll be a good one.
Good. I think I'm going to fish. There was a club I joined last year that I just didn't get the chance to fish with. Fish the waters at all, and I was too polite not to rejoin. And I didn't think it was gentlemanly to just join a year and leave it. So I've rejoined. So I plan on doing that. And it suddenly dawned on me that it was because I can fish with my dog where I fish on my home water, and I love fishing with him. So that was obviously the reason. But I plan to go fish some of this new water that I've not seen as well. So that's my hope with that. But Matt, when you guys, let's imagine you're planning a road trip somewhere or other, are you the sort of person who likes to delve deep into where you're going? Is it maps out? Is it getting all the information, perhaps finding out if you've got contacts wherever you're heading and stuff? Or is it sort of not seat of the pants, but slightly more relaxed sort of planning? How do you go about doing it?
I would have to say that I think we're probably delvers. There's a lot of phone calls made, a lot of research, a lot of rings on maps. And it's not. I don't think it's out of desperation to maximise the fishing output. I think it's just out of enthusiasm and interest about finding somewhere new. I mean, I'm certainly like that, whether it's fishing or hill walking related or whatever. If I'm having a trip, I want to kind of like really absorb myself in what's going on in that area and hopefully try and get the best of it, from an experience point of view. But yeah, I think back to the trips that we've made, we've sort of, good God, I mean, we've properly looked into it, haven't we? Phoned everyone, spoke to everyone that we know, and looked at all the possible beats if it's a river, and there's a lot of enjoyment to be had in that, especially if it's this time of year when there's not much else going on. It's just sort of it's part of the process of letting the anticipation build for what you can look forward to in the new season.
Nice, great answer. While I've got you, we've done really well by staying clear of all social media chat, but I wanted to talk to you about the environment, state of rivers. How are you feeling about that, Matt? And do you think we are starting to get a shift of realization of what's going on by the broader public? How do you feel about that right now?
I think we've got to be heading in the right direction when we've got people like Fergal batting our corner. Social media is a powerful tool, isn't it? And I think over time the issues are becoming more into the public domain. I saw something on Twitter a couple of weeks ago about, I think it was a BBC News story about potential jeopardy of otter populations due to water quality. Now that's the sort of thing that is going to grip the sort of public psyche, isn't it? Because otters are the furry face of our aquatic environments. Unfortunately, those guys who fish and care about slimy fish and the creepy crawlies that live under the stones, we're kind of always up against it really when it comes to raising awareness. But we've got some high profile campaigners doing great work on our behalf now. So I think it can only head in the right direction. I have to say that the stories that I hear are utterly depressing. I think we in the north of England may be a little sheltered from it because I think perhaps our rivers are, I think just by its nature, we live in a more rural part of the country. And I think so our rivers are perhaps a little bit less under pressure. There's certain issues with farming practices, but likewise, there's a lot of examples of good land management as well in the north of England. But to me, I don't want to put a negative feeling to things, but I just can't help but look beyond. Never mind climate change. This planet, the population on this planet's growing exponentially, and I just think we're going to reach a point where we hit some sort of terminal velocity where the damage that is done is irreparable. I can't see, unless population growth can be slowed, halted, or reversed. I think, unfortunately, we're heading down a one-way street to destruction of the natural world. I really do, and whether that's in 2 generations or 10 generations, I don't know. But the long-term prospects, I feel very, very. I feel we've passed the point of no return with it. I think we're on a one-way slide into oblivion now. I know that that's the stuff of sci-fi movies, isn't it? But yeah, we can't do anything about that. All we can do is concentrate on the here and now and what can be done in the sort of short to medium term future. And I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think there's very pertinent points. I was going to ask you to talk about social media to lift the mood a little bit then for a second. No, I think you're right, and I think we do all realise that, and like you say, the work that's being done, in the short term. I think that shift is happening, be it otters, be it surfers against sewage, be it free swimmers, whatever. Do you think, Stuart, that from that perspective that we need to embrace all areas of the communities and to unite those in a joint fight against water companies and other issues? Is that a better way to go about it? Do you think, with surfers, free swimmers, kayakers, whatever it may be, do you think that's a sound way to get the wider public involved in the debate and make them aware of what's happening?
Yeah, I think it's the only way. I think Matt said it there, didn't he? Like, if the otter population is threatened, people are on it straight away. If they can see the raw sewage and the items that get washed or not washed, but released into the rivers, if people can see that and they're swimming in those rivers, it's going to have an impact. But like we saw last year, countless times over in Wales, all those fish kills there barely made the news. But if they'd have been otters or birds or people even, that it would have been front page news. So yeah, we're fighting a losing battle if we're just trying to publicise the fishing's getting worse. So yeah, we do need to include all these other groups, other species, whatever. Just the more people we've got on board, the better. And like I say, if you get some more of those little cute animals that people love, then it's got to be better for us.
Yeah, I was chatting to a guy in the river actually, and he told me he'd heard of chiff chaff and bits and pieces like that. And then he said to me, because we were fishing, obviously the two of us were there, and I think Warren was fishing at the time, that he said, I've kayaked down and I've seen loads of grayling. And he said, I don't know if that's right or not. And it was kind of nice that he was sensitive to that. And we just sort of, it was fine. The worst part of it was he was telling us how many grayling he'd seen and how few we'd caught on that day, which hurt a little bit. But it was interesting. And we started on that debate a little bit as well, I think, if I remember rightly. And then I started talking about silt as well. And, I noticed this stretch of river I'd not fished for 2 or 3 years, and how silty it was in comparison to the last time I fished it, and the little stream that runs through my village that, we'd had a lift of the rain at the weekend, and I walked it yesterday and this morning actually as well, and still there was colour in it, yet the height had gone out. And all these sorts of issues are still of worry to me, I must admit. And, I know you used the term terminal velocity, Matt, and I think you could well be right, and that's beautifully phrased, and that is a worry. And whether we can, I always hope that nature can try and heal itself in some way, shape or form. But some of those points you make, and, you talk about population, and, so many times I've talked about the treatment works on rivers. With the demand for more houses, there's going to be more treatment works, or there's going to be a treatment work under so much pressure that it's not going to be able to cope. So, yeah, it's just got to change. And, we're seeing these costs go up, and that's only going to please the shareholders. And while those profits go up, then they're not going to want the profits to go down. So I don't know that they're going to want to use that money to invest back into the infrastructure. The only way I see it is fines get bigger. That's the only way I can see them being called to account and controlled. But fingers crossed that we see something continued, and the people like Fergal and others as well that are still continually fighting our corner. But you guys going to be fishing together on opening day, or does work not work for you on that front? Are you going to try and spend the day fishing together soon into the new season?
Yeah, we had a brief conversation about fishing on one of our rivers on opening day. So as a result, we was talking about the guy that Matt mentioned earlier in his streamers, and we thought that would be a good approach, at least for the morning until this massive hatch starts. Anyway, fish some streamers in the morning, then obviously move on to the dry flies when that starts.
Lovely. So you open 15th. Hopefully you'll be fishing together. I'll be able to picture that and hope you have a wonderful time. We've spoken for well over an hour now, guys, and I feel like we've only scratched the top of the iceberg. But what I really wanted to do was get listeners, and I, like I've said previously, to think about their fishing friends and spending time with them. And perhaps if you're listening and you've got a fishing friend that you've not fished with for a while, why not give them a call and see how they're doing, see if they want to spend some time on the river with you and do some fishing. But guys, it's been great as always to talk with you, to listen to what you have to say. I love talking to the pair of you because you just talk it straight, and I really, really enjoy that aspect of it, as well as hearing about your fishing processes and your skills with a fly rod. So thank you for that. You said at the very beginning, Stuart, photographs, and as I said, I've really been enjoying those landscapes you've been putting up last few days. If people want to see your fishing photographs, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter. I don't even know what my name is on. It's either Stuart Minnikin or it's Yorkshire Dales Fly Fishing. I can't remember which it is. I know the Instagram one's Yorkshire Dales Fly Fishing. So, but yeah, on both of those.
Fantastic. So if you are listening and want to see some of Stuart's work, likewise with Matt, you put a beautiful fish picture up the other day as well. And as Stuart said, you're very keen with the camera as well. Where can people go and find some of your pictures of your days fishing and stuff, should they want to do it?
I guess for nowadays it's just Twitter and Instagram for me. And Instagram, I have a pitiful number of followers, so no one's really that interested. But if you must, I think that my handle for both is NCA_Matt, which is a throwback to the old North Country Angler blog that I used to have. So it's NCA_Matt.
Fantastic. And I would heartily recommend to people to go and search the guys out, because they are saying and doing some great stuff. So I thoroughly enjoy seeing their pictures and what they have to think on fishing. Guys, it's been absolutely fantastic having you along. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. It's been brilliant. Matt, Stuart, thank you for coming on the Fly Culture podcast today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Fantastic. Everyone, that has been another wrap for the Fly Culture podcast. I'd like to end by saying a huge thank you to everyone who's downloaded the podcast. I get so many messages from listeners who tell me how much they've enjoyed them and where they listen to them. And perhaps you may be out open day, driving to the river and listening to one of these podcasts, perhaps listening to the guys tell us about their friendship and about the fishing they're doing. So I really enjoy those, and thank you so much. It means the world to me. I always reply to them. So please, if you want to, keep them coming. And if you have any guest suggestions as well, let me know. But thank you thank you everyone so much for listening to the Fly Culture podcast.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.